When we hear the word metabolism, our minds usually jump straight to burning calories, right? Diet, exercise, energy levels. But that's really just scratching the surface. The real story, the mind-blowing part, is happening inside every single one of your cells. It's like a microscopic chemical engineering factory that's been perfected over billions of years. So, let's pull back the curtain and take a look at its hidden genius.
And this gets us right to the heart of the matter. Just imagine a factory. You've got one crew over here, building these incredibly complex machines. And at the exact same time, in the exact same room, you've got another crew taking those very same machines apart for scrap metal and energy. How does anything ever get built? How does the cell manage this constant, contradictory chaos every single second? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve today.
So to figure out the solution, we first have to get a handle on the two fundamental forces that are at play here. The easiest way to think about them is as two sides of the very same metabolic coin.
At its most basic level, metabolism is just everything. It's the grand total of every single chemical reaction that is keeping you alive right now. It is a massive chemical symphony, but this symphony really has two very different movements playing at the same time.
So metabolism is basically split into two opposing teams. First up, you've got anabolism. This is your construction crew. They take simple little molecules and, using energy, build them up into big, complex things, like when your body repairs muscle tissue. And on the other side, you've got catabolism. This is your demolition and power crew. They break down the complex stuff, like the food you eat, to release energy and supply all those simple raw materials.
And here is the absolute key. These are not separate events that happen one after the other. Anabolism and catabolism are happening right now in the same cells at the same time. The demolition crew is literally handing off energy and bricks to the construction crew. They are completely and totally dependent on each other.
And this is where the real engineering problem gets fascinating. How in the world does the cell organize these two opposing forces to prevent complete and utter chaos?
Think about it. If you don't have any rules, you just get a mess. The construction crew builds a wall, and the demolition crew immediately knocks it right back down. It's what we call a futile cycle, and it wastes an incredible amount of energy. A cell just cannot afford that kind of inefficiency to survive. Now, to make things even crazier, some processes in the cell are what we call amphibolic, meaning they can actually play for both teams. A central hub, like the Krebs cycle, can either help break molecules down for energy, or it can supply the starting materials to build new things. It's the ultimate metabolic freelancer, which just cranks up the potential for chaos. So, how does life manage it all? It turns out it follows three brilliant, elegant rules. Okay, rule number one is just beautifully simple. You never ever use the exact same assembly line for opposite jobs. Take a look at this. Let's say the path to break down a molecule from A to B to C is one way. Well, the path to build it back up is not just C to B to A. It's a different route, maybe C to D to A. There are always unique steps, unique machinery, and different molecules in between. It's kind of like having a dedicated up escalator and a completely separate down escalator. You don't just run one escalator backwards. So why bother with two different paths? Well, it's all about one thing: control. If you have two different sets of controls, you can turn one on without messing with the other. You can floor the gas pedal on construction without accidentally slamming the brakes on demolition. This separation is the absolute foundation of all metabolic regulation. And that leads us perfectly into the second rule, which is all about how the cell actually uses those separate controls. This is a principle called reciprocal regulation, and it is incredibly clever. Think of a single light switch. When you flick it up, the lights in the construction area turn on. But at that exact same moment, a signal is sent to turn the lights in the demolition area off. One signal, two totally opposite effects. And the cell does this constantly. A hormone, or maybe a buildup of a certain molecule, acts as that single switch. It will physically activate the machinery in one pathway, while at the very same time it shuts down the machinery in the opposing pathway. And this is what prevents those pointless, wasteful cycles, where the cell just builds something up and breaks it right back down again. So you have separate paths, and you have opposing switches. But what makes sure that once a process starts, it actually finishes the job? That's where our third and final rule comes in. When a cell decides it's going to start a major metabolic process, it doesn't just dip a toe in the water. It dives in headfirst. The very first chemical step in that whole sequence is almost always designed to be a one-way street. Once that molecule takes that first step, it is committed. There's no going back.
So what makes it irreversible? It all comes down to energy. That first step usually involves a huge release of energy, often by spending a high-energy molecule like ATP. This makes the reaction so strongly favored in one direction that going backwards is, for all practical purposes, impossible inside the cell. It's the cell's way of slamming the door shut and saying, all right, we're doing this.
Okay, so we've got our 3 rules: separate paths, opposing switches, and a point of no return. Let's see how they all work together in a real-life example that shows just how incredibly flexible and, well, intelligent this whole system is. Let's talk about something called the pentose phosphate pathway, or PPP for short. You can think of this thing as a metabolic Swiss Army knife. It's a pathway that kicks off with glucose, just like the main energy-producing pathways, but it can be reconfigured on the fly to produce very different things depending entirely on what the cell needs in that exact moment.
So the PPP really has 2 main jobs. Job number 1, it produces a sugar called ribose, which is an absolutely essential building block for DNA and RNA. Job number 2, it generates something called NADPH. You can think of NADPH as a specialized little battery pack, providing the very specific kind of power needed to build other important molecules, like fatty acids. And this is where the genius of this pathway really shines. Let's say the cell needs a ton of that NADPH power to build fats, but it's not dividing, so it doesn't need any new DNA. Well, it would be stuck with all this leftover ribose. But instead of just wasting it, the PPP can actually reconfigure its own parts and recycle those leftover molecules, turning them right back into sugars that can be used for energy. It adapts perfectly with almost zero waste. When you put it all together, you realize this isn't just some dumb chemical assembly line. It's a dynamic, self-regulating logic circuit. It's constantly assessing the cell's needs and adjusting its output in real time, all by using these simple but incredibly powerful rules to run an efficient internal factory. This hidden genius of metabolism, this blueprint for balancing opposing forces, for managing resources efficiently, and for dynamic self-regulation, it's been working flawlessly for billions of years. It really makes you wonder, what other incredible principles of organization and wisdom, perfected by nature, are just waiting for us to finally understand and learn from?